Welcome, Amanita lovers. In this video, we're going to explore some interesting contemplations and similarities between Amanita muscaria and a plant from the middle of Africa called Iboga. One of the first things that I'd like to just mention before we get going is how, in particular, in the Amanita genus, something that is taxonomically significant is a particular feature which is called a vulva, which is a cup-like structure which is found at the base of the mushroom, which is a remnant of what's called a universal veil, or the remains of a peridium that encloses the immature fruit bodies of the Amanita, while it's gestating, before it breaks through the veil and grows up into the Amanita mushroom. And the scales that we see on top of the caps are the remains of the veil, which basically are moving apart. So if you imagine if I had a balloon and I got a marker pen and I put lots of dots on it, as I blew that balloon up, those dots are going to move further and further away. And that's how Amanita ends up with its beautiful white spots on top of its cap. So with Amanita, what we see working with this energy is that signature, that being able to break through the veil. And it's exactly the same with Iboga. The shamans there, they talk about the ability that this plant has to pierce through the veils of illusion. We know that in nature, colours equal constituents, and constituents equal actions. And in the Amanita muscaria, the muscimole is the orangey colour flesh, which is just underneath the red of the cap. If you peel a cap, or even sometimes if it's rained hard enough, you'll see that's where the muscimole is. And I can't help but see a similarity between the colour of that and the colour of the actual fruit of Iboga. Although with Iboga, you're actually taking the root of the plant, which is underground, and with the Amanita, you are using the cap. As above, so below. There are also some thought-provoking synchronicities around the distribution of these two medicines. Amanita muscaria tends to grow in the northern hemispheres, and that's where there is the least amount of sunlight. And as we've touched on previous videos before, that's one of the reasons why Amanita muscaria contains such high volumes of vitamin D, because it's really there to also support in the winter months when light levels are very low. But it will grow in other areas, as you can see on this distribution map in the pink. It's not as common, but you will also find it in the southern hemisphere. Iboga, meanwhile, can be found growing in what's known as the heart of Africa. You can see on this distribution map here, like a little kind of cluster, particularly around the Congo. If we superimpose these two maps, you can see above there the Sahara Desert. I mean, nothing really grows there. It's a tough place to survive. But just below that, where the Amanita is the most scarce, and that's where the Iboga starts to be found. This interesting correlation got me thinking about Pangaea. At one point the Earth was not the 7 continents it is now, it was just one continent. And similar to how the scales on top of the Amanita spread out when it grows, the continents were formed by that pressure of the tectonic plates, moving them slowly and gradually apart. This got me thinking about the distribution. Iboga is really very much like the center, like an eye in the middle, like the pupil, and then you've got that kind of dead zone of around it, and then outside of those two zones is this wider band where the Amanita grows. So let's look culturally at some of the similarities. This image shows a Korak woman, obviously, who's dressed like an Amanita, but it's interesting that the tribespeople, the Bwiti tribe, as they're known, from the Congo, who are working with the Iboga, also have chosen red and white as their main colours in many of their arts, their textiles, and that's even painted on their faces during the ceremony. So let's have a look at the chemistry for any correlation. And the one thing that obviously strikes you immediately is that you have ibogaine, which is the active constituents inside Iboga, and ibotenic acid, one of the primary active constituents inside Amanita muscaria, both sharing the same suffix ibo. In Latin, ibo is a future tense of the verb io, which means to go. So it kind of translates as I will go. So kind of indicating that movement or an intention to move something. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this contemplation between these two incredible teachers. I've definitely been down the rabbit hole and enjoying sharing my findings from there.